Every day it seems like a different quarterback is changing teams. Most recently, we have Matt Ryan going from the Atlanta Falcons to the Indianapolis Colts. And the reason this is important to me is because where does it leave Baker Mayfield? Deshaun Watson going to Cleveland, and now Matt Ryan going to Indy, where I thought Baker Mayfield would go. Let's talk about and look at where Baker could end up now. Now, we're really running out of teams because I'd say at least 25 teams have very good quarterbacks, or at least are in positions where they're not going to be moving on from their quarterback in this year or even the next year. Like they've got their guy for the foreseeable future. And so we start looking at teams who need a quarterback. And what it comes down to, in my opinion, is Carolina and Seattle. Those are really the two teams that are in desperate need of quarterbacks. And then there's a couple other teams that would be interested in Baker because they have competitions and they have guys that could definitely be upgraded. And as far as quarterbacks available at this point, there's really only left with Jimmy Garoppolo. And I don't think Baker's as good as Jimmy Garoppolo. However, Baker is much younger and has more of a future. So if you're Seattle, if you're Carolina, and you're in the need of a quarterback, and you have Drew Lock and Sam Darnold, you're definitely looking at these two guys as upgrades. But if you're Seattle and you're not really looking to win now, you're just trying to build for the future, why would you go with Sam Darnold? Why would you go with Jimmy Garoppolo over Baker Mayfield? And then to make the argument, why would you go with Baker Mayfield over someone in the draft? And that's where it gets interesting, and it could almost end up being Baker Mayfield doesn't have a job, and he's just left as a backup quarterback because he's a former number one overall pick, and he's had good seasons, he's had bad seasons, he's had injuries, and he's pretty much always seemed to think of himself as much better than he actually is, and I think that's just how he is, and that's a good thing. He plays with a great level of confidence, and I think that's a really good thing for him, but is he even a starting quarterback at this point? Because so many teams have their guy, and is he better than someone you could bring in? Like, you've seen what he can do. How much better is he going to get? We've seen him be great in college, but how good is he as a pro? He hasn't proven to be amazing. He's proven to be good, but not, what you want from a number one pick. Like we saw with Jared Goff, there's a reason. If you're number one pick and your team moves on from you, there's obviously a reason. It's because you're not as good as you were expected to be, and you're not good enough to get the job done. The Rams get rid of Jared Goff and immediately win a Super Bowl. I'm not saying the same for Cleveland, but you make a move. The guy you thought was your savior isn't what you thought he is, and you make a move and things happen. So that's what the Browns are needing to do. And seeing what happened with Jared Goff, why would you be in a hurry to bring in Baker Mayfield if you're in one of these other teams? As far as the teams that are bringing him in, like I said, Carolina and Seattle, those are the teams that are in desperate need of quarterback. I doesn't make too much sense to me. Like I'd look to the draft first, especially because these teams have higher draft picks and quarterbacks aren't going at the top this year. Like Baker's 26, he's not getting any younger, and you could bring in a 20-year-old just as easy as you could bring in Baker. Like you'd have to give up no assets or draft pick. And if you're Carolina, it makes more sense to me than Seattle. I think Seattle's got to draft it because that's just a really young team and you got a big rebuild. Where Carolina's got some good players where you bring in Baker and just let him go. And if it works out, you give him like a year or two. If it works, you make it work. If it doesn't, you just get a better quarterback and a higher draft pick than what you have right now just because this quarterback class isn't elite. But then you look at other teams, and Baker Mayfield's very competitive. How would he do in a quarterback competition? If you're Detroit, if you're the New York Giants, you bring Baker Mayfield in, a guy that's always had a competitive edge. He came in as a walk-on, moved up the ranks of college football, won the Heisman, got drafted number one overall. He's going to compete with a guy, so you bring him in to compete with Jared Goff. You see who's better. Can imagine how great Baker Mayfield would, Dan Campbell would be those two fiery guys. Or you bring him into New York, let him compete with Daniel Jones for a starting job and see where it plays out there. So I think that's the options for Baker. If Matt Ryan's getting traded for only a third round pick, I can't imagine Baker Mayfield's worth more than a fourth or a fifth, especially if a team's not really like super excited to get him just because there's not much of a need for a quarterback at this point in the NFL offseason. Like, he's not the only move you can make. You can get a guy without having to give up anything. Like there's still free agents available, and whatever the asking price for Jimmy G is, Baker Mayfield's asking price has to be slightly lower in my opinion. Or like if you're gonna get a fourth for Baker Mayfield, then maybe you have to go up two. You have to give up two to get Jimmy Garoppolo. Like I think teams value Jimmy Garoppolo slightly higher than Baker Mayfield. Like if you look at the numbers, Garoppolo's just won more games in Mayfield's career. He's 29-30 as a starter, where Garoppolo's 33-14. And I know the teams are different and definitely different situations. As far as the teams who are just better at winning, we all know Cleveland's historically been a losing franchise, but big stat as a quarterback is if you win games or not. Like, no matter how good your numbers are, if you don't make the playoffs at the end of the year, you're not good. Your job's not going to be locked up. Like, you could throw for 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns, but you don't find a way to make the playoffs because you throw picks in the fourth quarter, your job's going to be gone at the end of the day. So, a guy like Baker Mayfield who just kind of slings the ball around and potentially gives games away because of bad turnovers. Because you look at his touchdown interception ratio, this season he threw 20 or this season Mayfield threw 17 touchdowns and 13 interceptions in the 14 games he played in. Like, that's quite concerned right there if you're just looking at simple numbers like that before you get into too advanced stats. So if you're a team, how much do you really want Baker Mayfield? Like, it's worth a shot if we're giving guys like Mitch Trubisky another shot, but because you know the talent's there, like, top draft pick, still a young player, still room to grow in a better system, but it's tough. Like, how bad does anybody really want Baker Mayfield? It's like, if he was worth wanting, he wouldn't have been gotten rid of. Like, we know Deshaun Watson's really good, but he's in a unique situation where he may not even be starting the start of the season. He's going to be dealing with potential suspension. So if you're trying to get a guy to replace the guy you currently have, and this guy's not allowed to play half the season, and you know that coming in, then why should anybody else want this guy? You know what I mean? Like, it's that type of situation where if someone really like, why would anyone really want this guy if they're getting rid of him? It's that type of deal where he's had a good team, hasn't won, so what makes anybody else think they can do it? But I think he'll end up somewhere. I think he'll end up starting by midseason. I think the best move for Baker is to get himself in a quarterback situation, a competition. By the end of the day, I think he's going to end up going to Carolina, and I think he's going to end up competing with a rookie, and I think he'll end up winning it because I don't think the quarterbacks in the draft are that good. But that's my final prediction for Baker Mayfield. I think he's going to end up in Carolina.